And we're live. Welcome, everyone. Feel free to say hello in the chat. We'll start soon in a couple of minutes. We'll just hold on 1 or 2 more minutes as people are trickling in. We already have a good number going up. Hey, Thomas. Hello. Miguel, Mason. See a few names that already attended other webinars. It's good to see you.
The regulars.
Back. Yeah, Clemente. Maybe from Italy. Pasi, hi. Ciao dall'Italia. Ciao. Ciao da Berlino. We're actually in Berlin, Christoph and I. Where are you, Antoine? I forgot. You're moving.
I'm in Leipzig.
In Leipzig. Okay, we're all Germans here.
Yep.
All right. A few more people coming in. Stanislav. Hey, Tal. From Israel. How you doing? All right. Okay. We'll give people another minute. But we can already maybe start with a quick round of introductions. I'm Luca. I lead product here at Humanitech, and I'll be your moderator today. I'll support our 2 speakers, Christoph, who's the co-founder and CEO at Humanitech, and Antoine, DevOps master and friend of the Humanitech family. So today, guys, we'll talk about managing variables across different environments, and we'll also get our hands dirty with a demo. So we'll start right away, but just in terms of housekeeping, you can drop your questions in the chat at any time. We'll get to them either during the presentations if they're quick and it makes sense, or we'll just answer them at the end in the Q&A. And by the way, you'll also receive a follow-up email at the end of the later today or tomorrow morning with all the links to the materials and a recording. So this will be recorded. All right, we're 2 minutes in. Good numbers of attendees. Let's get going. I'll leave it to you, Christoph, and I'll disappear.
Thank you, Luca. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm Christoph, CEO and co-founder of Humanitech, and really happy to be here today and to be here with Antoine, who is a DevOps engineer and who was working with me and is working with me and the team on helping customers of Humanitech to get ready for Humanitech and to onboard them. So great to have you here, Antoine. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And one of the questions that, Antoine and I were talking quite a bit over the last weeks and months, and one topic that always came up was questions around environment variables. And that ended up in a nice content piece from you, Antoine, on our blog, which we'll share later, but also in the idea of this webinar to just share some of the thoughts we have on environment variables. And I'd say, let's get started with that. But before going into environment variables, maybe start one step above with environments. So if I talk with teams, I often hear, oh yeah, we have 4 environments, and they might be called development, QA, production. Antoine, from your experience, is this something you also see? And why do you think teams are limiting themselves to a number of static environments?
So firstly, an environment is just a place where you can deploy your applications and its associated resources. And here what you are showing, it's a linear way of deploying your software. Each step here is a static environment. And yeah, so you will move your code from the first one to the QA one for some testing, and you will end in production. So there are good and bad things about this. So the thing is that when you have this kind of setup, developers are constantly pushing new functionalities and code to the development environment first. And since they are all in the same testing in the same place, it can end up having some inconsistencies and also some functionalities conflicts. So I had
that's why I'm hearing so often my environment is broken. That's what they mean, right?
Yeah, exactly. This happened to me where a lot when I was in a project in France. There was a guy spending his whole time rescuing the environments. He was like a developer. He knew a bit of Linux, but he was the guy doing that. And yeah, so he made a lot of SSH there in this project, and we were waiting him to rescue the environments. Like we were kind of blocked.
That's super interesting. So, and if you look into more advanced teams, would they do the same, or would they manage their environments differently?
They would have more dynamicity there. So it's also it's the same. It requires also more knowledge to have dynamic environments.
So that's probably what you're showing here, right? Maybe you want to explain what we see.
Yeah, here is more complex. What you see on the top line are environment templates that we instantiate multiple times. And I see there is a special environment for me, development Antoine, that's cool. So I can have my own environment and experiment new features there. I can break everything and it's not a big deal. So I am allowed to make errors here and the other developers can continue their work. And yeah, so there are no conflicts in this situation. Same for...
And why is this more difficult to achieve?
It's more difficult because you have to invest at the beginning. You have to externalize your whole configuration in order to make a dynamic. Your application has to be ready to take in account new changes, like a server endpoint being redeployed somewhere else.
Understood. Okay. Well, maybe before jumping into this in more detail, let's have a poll, and let's have a poll and ask people how many environments they actually have. I share this in the poll section. So it would be great if you could just answer the question: how many environments does your team have? Just 1, 3 to 4, many dynamic environments, or I don't know, which is also an okay answer. Okay, we are seeing people answering 3 to 4 or many dynamic environments. Interesting. Let's say a few more have 3 to 4. All right. Okay. I think that gives us a good understanding of the audience. So, Antoine, I mean, the topic of this webinar was environment variables and not environments. How is this related to environment variables?
How is this related? In the first slide you showed, everything was static. So it means you can hard code the variables inside your application code. But in this case, you're obliged to make everything dynamic, and environment variables are the key in order to achieve that.
All right, cool. Then maybe going back to the topics of this webinar that we want to cover, there's these 3 questions: how to decouple environment variables from application code. And you already said you need to externalize your configuration, how to store and manage environment variables, and then how to version track and diff your environments. And then I think you will jump into a short demo at the end, if I got that right. Yeah. But let's start with the first question. So how to decouple environment variables from application code. And I just copied this from your article, basically. So maybe you want to talk a bit about what we see here.
Yes, I recognize these famous environment variables. There are 3 types of them. An API key. It makes your app communicate with someone what is outside your infrastructure. Then the second type is a password. So it's a type of environment variable which is hidden. And a backend endpoint, it's a bit the tricky one. It's a type where you point to something inside your own infrastructure. So you want to ask how I would do to decouple environment variables from my code. And firstly, I would, of course, git clone the application, start it locally on my computer, and then I will begin to analyze what is happening there. I'm going to try to see if the application is communicated with other modules or services or something outside the infrastructure, and this will let me identify what is the interface between the application and the rest of the world. So once I...
And how long will that typically take you?
Well, this can be this can last some days if the application is well coded, if it's a new application. But if you have a setup like a big monolith which has 3 years of lifetime, then it can be longer. You even sometimes you are obliged to change the architecture of your application in order to achieve that.
And for example, you have to containerize it, or if it's not there yet, or do things like that, correct?
Yeah, you have to split into microservices, for example, or...
Okay, so it can be many different questions. So maybe to jump into another thing that I copied, I think also from your blog post. So is this what you then end up with?
So this is a Docker Compose file. Docker Compose is a tool which lets you start your services locally for testing purposes, and it starts it on the same network, so they are connected together. And yeah, in this example, you see a backend endpoint outside of the application code, which is a good practice. And this is all part of the standardization process of your application you have to go through. And there are several steps. The first one is to split into microservices. So this is recommended. You can deal with a monolith, but as I said, it's not so easy. Then use Linux. You make it through Docker. And the third thing is then find a universal way to define your parameters, and this is environment variables. So the key sentence here is build once, run everywhere.
So you're building your service application monolith once, and then you're using the same image throughout all the different environments. Is that right?
Yeah. If we think about this schema of dynamic environments, when I click on the button create environment, I don't want my app to rebuild. I want just to have the application start right away.
Yeah, understood. All right, cool. So that's how you decouple your environment variables from application code. We learned can be a journey, and I know you helped a couple of our customers to actually get there. Now, the next question that arises is obviously how to store and manage environment variables. And we said when discussing this yesterday, we won't go into all the details on how to store environment variables in Kubernetes or in certain. That we have some articles about that we'll share later. But maybe to just give a very rough overview over how to store environment variables. This is, I think, also taken from your blog post, if I remember right. So what do we see here?
I see here several environment variables. You appeal to my Kubernetes knowledge here. This is a Kubernetes manifest. What is important is to store them is to choose the right solution. If you are in a cloud provider, then you store it in the cloud provider directly. If you have a developer platform, then you will create a set of environment variables that you are going to use to instantiate your environments and optionally override if necessary. And then you can also just define it in a Docker Compose file for local testing purposes, as I shown in the Docker Compose file.
Understood. Okay, I think I remember one quote from you. I might quote you wrong here, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think you once said you are allergic to configuration. Is that right? And what does that mean?
Yeah, that's true. I wrote it in the article for your blog. And this was just to give an idea of my illness. As a developer, when I had problems with the configuration of an application, I looked at the configuration file, I looked at the colleague on my left, and I told him, let's grab a coffee. I just didn't want to work with that. Like the person who created the configuration file in general is someone who already left the project, like an architect, or okay, it has been refactored, used many times by other guys who, as me, they didn't know exactly what they were doing with it, and you are so like you are afraid of breaking everything, like when you touch to it. So this is the.
So you drank coffee instead.
Yeah, or like drink coffee to be really intelligent and concentrated to do this.
All right, understood. Yeah, I think that's typically a problem if you're trying to work on something that somebody else built who might have already left for quite a while. Cool. Thanks for sharing. So maybe we jump into the last point before going into a demo on how that could look like in real life. If I talk to teams, I start seeing teams dealing with environments pretty much the same way as they do with code in Git. So I hear words like diff and version and track and patch. Why is that?
Having a configuration as a code is a good practice in general. Infrastructure as a code, pipeline as a code, and environment configuration as a code. So it's cool because you can put it in a version control system. You can also diff it. So
let's talk about diffing. I think you brought an example for that. So if I got that right, you're comparing two different environments here. What are you interested in when doing that?
I am interested into knowing if I have the same version deployed on here in this example, development and QA. And yeah, like the rest is obviously different because we are in a dynamic, we have a dynamic setup. So the backend endpoints can be different. The data of the databases are of course different for development and QA. Database name the same. And yeah, here this number is actually just as an example, the version number of a service inside my environment.
So that's the thing you're really interested in. That's the I don't know how you want to call it, material difference or the important difference that you want to see. Why is that important to you? Why do you want to see that?
I want to see that because if I have some problems there, I want to see if it's related to the infrastructure, the database, or the application itself. And
okay, so I think you brought one more picture. So here you reduced all the noise, right?
Yeah, it's we put some placeholders where it was the same. It's the developer instinct to make a refactoring.
So whenever you see similar things, you're refactoring to actually.
Exactly.
Okay, that's probably good to know if I work next with you for my next project. So don't show you anything that's different, or you will refactor. Okay, so if we tie this back to our example from the beginning, so when would diffing things become handy to you? When is it useful?
In the same way, I make a git diff between my development branch and master branch before merging. I would make here a diff between development Antoine and QA. So in this case, it would be helpful, yeah.
So and with the diff, you would see all the differences, and then that would help you to see whether you can push your changes without breaking anything, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I can maybe show an example of that. And
sure. I mean, yeah, let's jump into a demo then. I mean, take over my screen. I think you can just
yes,
override me.
wait a few seconds. That's
Sure, sure.
okay. Okay, I think that's good now. So here we are on a developer platform, and we have 3 environments: development, production, QA. And here there are some deployments that were made. So environment templates are already set up. If I click here, I will see the front end of the application, which is deployed here. So this is a simple task list. Then I can also do the same for QA. So click here. I'm going to see what's shown here. So yeah, obviously we don't see the same data on the 2 front ends. So if I add something new, it won't only show up here and not in this second tab on the QA environment. This is just to confirm that the databases are different. Okay, so if I go back here to development, earlier I was talking about defining the environment variables outside your code, and we're going to check. Not here, not in the front end, but I guess in the back end, the service will have something. Yes. So connection string, this is an environment variable which is set. And as you can see, it's not hard-coded. It's dynamically set with some placeholders. Up. So yeah, so what I can do also is create another environment. And yes, we were talking about an environment called Development Antoine. I'm going to use the same name.
So you want to have your own environment to mess with?
Exactly. I want to be able to make errors. Up. And here I choose the environment type I want to clone from. So I use the development one. Up. And okay, here I am in development Antoine. I'm going to check if everything is still there. So yeah, my front end is here. My service, the environment variable is still set. The Postgres database is here. Yeah, I'm going to try to deploy this then. So here you see there is no deployed version of that yet. So so prepare for some experiments. Okay, now it's deploying. Okay, it seems to be up and running because I see this little smiley. So I click here and I will see, yes, now I have a new environment where I can put some experiments. So in order to do that, I will simply push to my repository. Then it will create a new image that I can choose. So not here, but in the draft mode. So
So then you can mess around with it.
exactly, I can choose a new image to deploy to this environment and see the results. When I'm done with that, I can destroy my environment. I just click here, delete. Okay, back to the original state. I think that's pretty much it for this demo. Or maybe you think I can show something else?
How do you diff?
Yeah, almost forgot about diffing. Here, diff deployment. Yes, I see some difference between these two deployments. A new environment variable was set. I'm going to try again here. Is there a difference? Yes. So yeah, that's pretty much good. If so you want to roll back to an old state, you can create a draft from a diff, and we won't do that now, but I think that it will create some draft, like modification in progress state here, and I would be able to redeploy it to go back to this first deployment.
All right, cool. Thanks, Antoine. All right.
Awesome.
Luca is back. Welcome back, Luca.
We already have a few questions that came in. Let's go in chronological order. Alan is asking, how do you manage secrets?
That's a very fair question. And maybe I can go first, Antoine. You can add. My feeling is, as a developer, you shouldn't care whether something is a secret or not. You should be able to handle it the same way. And so I think what we do in Humanitec is we are actually storing secrets in a Vault container, and then only use them during deployment. And I think you could show this, Antoine, if you export or try to show the connection string. There's one secret in there, which is the password. It's treated differently. But I think from a user experience in Humanitec itself, it pretty much feels the same. The only difference is a secret you can only enter once and never read out again. You will only see stars.
Antoine, are you sharing your screen to show it?
I want first to find the place where it's defined here.
And then, Alan, let us know if that answers your question. And then I think it could actually follow up on that. Christoph Kostis is asking, what if I'm using HashiCorp Vault or Zookeeper or Consul for my variables? Can I use all of them in Humanitec in an easy way?
That's a super interesting question, and I'd love to dive into that. In general, we are providing a Vault instance for every user or user account on Humanitec, so that the secrets are stored safely. But we also think that there's one thing on our roadmap is how to connect to customized Vault instances or other solutions, and so it would be very interesting to see how to get this actually up and running. The basic concept of Humanitec is a concept of extensibility. So we build everything so that it can be extended, and that would be an interesting use case.
So yeah, just to come back to the question, how to set secrets. So here I can create a new secret. Then I put its value. So of course you will see the value yourself the first time you type it. And then you tick this box. So on Humanitec or on other platform, it works the same as always. I always saw like this, that then when you want to reuse it, you have the value hidden.
Cool. Ellen, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. And Kostas, let us know if that answers your questions. If you have any follow up, just post it in the chat. And we're open for other questions as well, guys. So feel free to post more. Just looking at the polls results. All right, no worries, Kostas. There's it. Okay, Alan is saying, thanks for the perspective. From security point of view, Vault seems nice, especially if only certain user product team can manage their secrets. Thumbs up. Simple UI.
Yeah, there's one other thing with secrets that I'm always and environment variables that might be an afterthought, but it's important, at least from my experience. And that is getting, and we could see this briefly when Antoine created the environment variable, because you can add a description. And I mean, now you can laugh and say, who needs description for environment variables? I was in situations where the key question was, who set up that environment variable? Who created that Google Maps API key within the organization? And people just didn't know. If you use comments and track this, then life can get much easier, especially if you're in a large setup and you at least know whom to ask if the API key stops working or something else breaks.
Yeah, traceability all the way. All right, Mason is asking, can we use values passed from GitHub CI? One second. GitHub CI to populate environment variables, like having, like pull request number example.com.
So yeah, for this one, I think it's not possible to directly set your environment variable like this, apart if you use the Humanitec API. So they are API first. They have an API first approach, and I think it's possible. It's possible to do anything, maybe even more than with the UI with their application command line. So with their API.
Yeah, you could, for example, set up a very simple GitHub action that actually does that.
Yeah, and maybe if it can help you, I can show this build and push GitHub action.
Yeah,
yep,
definitely.
Go ahead.
While you pulled it up, Stanislav is asking if it's possible to have a demo or trial period for something like this. I'll get that. Yes, it is. And we will follow up in the email with a link to that as well, Stanislav, so you can check that out. So yeah, before we get to your question, Vladimir, let's see the GitHub actions.
Yes, so you were talking about your GitHub pipeline. This is what you are going to add in your GitHub pipeline here in order to push a new image to the platform. So when you are pushing, these are the only things you can set, but there are also some further options you can find. So do you have a good documentation? You can just check this out. You can copy paste the link.
We can share that also. We can also share that in the email, in the follow-up email. Happy to do so.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we will. All right, cool. So Vladimir is saying we have multiple teams, and in our Kubernetes clusters, we have numerous applications. When a team works in a feature, they have pull requests for front-end and back-end applications. Is it possible to spin off an environment which will be based those both pull requests and includes some dependent services relevant to the team, but not all application services of all other teams, which we have in production cluster? That's a mouthful. How to deal with the cases when we want to change environment variables for this new dynamic environment. Christoph, you take that one.
I mean, Yeah, it's probably difficult to answer without more context, but I'm happy to follow up on that in detail. But in general, absolutely. I mean, the challenge typically is, and that I've seen that with a couple of teams. There's one fundamental question in there: do you need all the services to actually run your dynamic environment? If the answer is yes, then you can come up with something where you provide a set of services static and link them to all the environments. That obviously only works if your services are stateless. If you don't require all the services, then that's absolutely possible. You create one environment where you just have the services you need, and for that new pull request, you just clone that environment. Might be a high-level answer, but I'd love to follow up on that in more detail. But yes, it can be done.
All right. Thomas is asking, what if I have some distributed environments which have hierarchical structure, like single global part, multiple regions, etc.? How to manage variables in such way?
Yeah, there is, and here I'm also not sure if I understand the question fully, but as Antoine showed, there's different ways of managing environment variables. You can manage them on an application level, so you can say, this is an environment variable I set on the application level, and then it's used in all the environments. And then you can start overwriting this for certain environments or environment types. So you could say, if I'm in a environment region A, then the environment variable needs to be, I don't know, Germany, because it specifies the region or the country. So yes, there's a hierarchical way of dealing with environment variables, and you can always, in your local environment, you can also override them if you need to. If you don't, then we pull in the environment variables from the hierarchy above that.
Cool. Mason is following up, asking if it's possible to use Helm to install Helm charts on our Kubernetes clusters.
Well, in the end, that's what Humanitec does. I mean, the way Humanitec works is it actually creates Helm charts for you. It uses Helm chart templates, and then when it deploys, it just modifies these templates and deploys to a Kubernetes cluster. Mm-hmm. On our roadmap, there is the option to bring your own Helm charts, and I see this with teams that have very specific sidecars or that want to do crypto stuff, and so if that's the case, then happy to follow up on that, because it's on our roadmap. Yes.
I want to add,
and you can export these. And you can export those Helm charts. There's a very nice article. Maybe we should share that also, Luca, on how to export charts and chart sets. And use them for manual deployments, for example.
I'm not sure it's Helm directly, but at least Kubernetes manifests here, if I'm right.
Yeah, we are using Helm for the deployments, and then you can export the Kubernetes manifest, which you need to run the entire deployment. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Subromania is asking how to maintain environment and variable history on the same environment. So as an example, an API key variable modified multiple times on that.
I think I want to stop sharing my screen next time. I
think that's a good idea. Just keep it.
Because this is what I shown with the diff. So here you were talking about the history, and if I click here and I make diff, I can see the difference. So this is actually the history of what was added, what was removed on your environment in general, and it includes the environment variables.
But something that's also on our roadmap, but not there yet, is to actually provide the full change history of the environment variables you enter. That's definitely something we'll look into. And
Nice.
as you said, I mean, currently you can do that, as Antoine showed, by just reverting back to an old deployment and check the environment variable there, especially if you changed an API key. That's very often it's pretty straightforward. You just copy the API key. It can get more tricky if you have very complex environment variable setups where you would like to see the history of what was changed when and by whom. And that's absolutely possible, just not available in the UI yet.
All right. No worries. All right. So, I mean, Vladimir had a follow-up on his question. He actually meant only for some specific team. I'm not sure whether.
Well, then it should be fine. I think that was the question of, do you need all the services? If you just need a certain set of services for each team, so and your application is fine with that, then yes, you can template that, and you can use the API to auto-trigger deployments to that subset for that subset of services.
All right, we got it, Vladimir. Nice. Loving this. Lots of questions. All right, well, keep them coming, guys. We have a couple more minutes left, so we want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we'd like to keep them short and crisp. So, all right, Mason, can we also manage multiple apps on each environment? I mean, pull request from repo A will trigger deployment on app A, and pull request from repo B will trigger pipeline for app B.
Yeah, I mean, you can connect as many pipelines and repositories as you want. I mean, typically, if you close that window, Antoine, even what you see here is two different services from two different repositories. And they end up in this application. Now you could also create another application that has these two services plus more, or you create another environment that has more services. That's all possible, and you can connect to as many repositories as you want. There's also deployment automation, so you can auto-deploy builds from your repositories, and then there's webhooks so that you can get an info once the deployment has been finished. So this entire, we didn't go into this continuous delivery capabilities in this webinar, but yeah, definitely. And I'm happy to follow up on that.
Nice. All right. Any more questions? Yes. No worries, Clemente. So Alan is asking, bit of topic, is there a way to interconnect provision clusters and access certain endpoints that get exposed by other private network only, not over publicly exposed network, potentially connect cloud environment to on-prem cluster?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. And that would be probably a bit too far to answer this here. But yes, it's something we do. Typical situation is you have a monolith, and then you have a set of services you run in a Kubernetes cluster, and you can manage the Kubernetes part of the application with Humanitec and connect to a static cluster or on-prem cluster wherever you want. You can also choose the location of new environments. For each environment, you can basically define, and that's the basic concept of Humanitec. So there's two views. There's this developer view, and there's also an ops view on that. And the ops team can define as many different environment types as they want. And each environment type can have different infrastructure. So you could say and this is actually something one of our customers does. Our dev and staging environments are run on EKS, so Amazon, and our production cluster runs on AKS, so Azure, and connects to a different set of databases. The experience in the front end will be exactly the same. The only thing that changes is how stuff works in the background. And you can select that for every environment type where it should be deployed. Yes.
Cool. Alan's also asking if you can choose the location of new environments.
Yeah, that's what I just answered. Sorry.
Okay, got it.
And then you also asked anyway.
Maybe we can actually
Kubernetes.
also.
Just one sec. So OpenID authentication per user similar. We are actually working on. So yes, you can manage Kubernetes clusters via the UI. We are also releasing RBAC this quarter to control access for the users in Humanitech. So role-based access control. So yes, absolutely possible to do that.
All right, and actually, maybe Antoine, you can show real quick the view from the organizational settings point of view what Krista was talking about, so that Alan gets a better idea.
So where is it again?
As you go on the top right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, here you can generate your pipeline snippets. So someone asked about GitHub. You can generate token, and then here is your snippet. You can copy paste. So someone was also talking about using your own cluster, and you can do it by adding an account, or if you do nothing, it will by default use the Humanitech cluster. Static resources. I admit it's the first time I go into these options.
Yeah, so there's two different concepts. There's static resources and dynamic resources, and the main difference is a dynamic resource is something that is connected once, and then whenever you create a new environment, it auto creates things in there. Good example are databases. So you do the database connection once, and then for every new environment you're creating new tables within this database. Static resources are resources that are static to an environment. So your Kubernetes cluster, for example, as I said, you could connect your AKS cluster and say, all my development and staging environments should be connected to that AKS cluster. You can also connect to static databases. Good example is you have your production database and it's a static database. You maintain this yourself. It's, I don't know, there's some special backup routines running on it. And then you can say, okay, I run for my production environment, I want to connect to that static resource. DNS can also be a good example for a static resource. You want your staging environment always to be available at staging@yourcompany.com or whatever IP or URL you want to have. So that's also a good example for a static resource.
All right, very cool. Okay, guys, we're running over the time. Got it. I'll dig deeper into the talk. Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the questions. And we'll follow up with all the material. And happy to have a chat if you have more questions.
Maybe you can show the last slide, Christophe.
I definitely can.
The backup slide.
Nope.
No, the outro slide.
Bye, Mason. Thank you. Thank you, Kostas.
Mais de rien du tout, Kostis.
Kostis. All right, guys, we're almost closing with the final slide. If you have any more questions, pop them in now.
So yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out or by answering the email that we're going to send out. Also, Antoine helped a lot of our customers to actually onboard. He's great in that. He's great in
available
bringing
new freelance opportunities. So reach me out.
Here's a bit of advertisement, which is
shameless plug.
Absolutely. If you want to get ready for dynamic environments, feel free to reach out to Antoine. Thanks, Antoine, for your time today. It was great. Thanks also for contributing to our blog. We'll share these articles later. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, too.
Thanks everyone for attending. I think we can close it now. Have a good evening or day wherever you are.
Bye bye, Luca. Bye bye, Christophe.
Bye, guys.
Bye.